which I hope will be next month, it will be gorgeous. It will be unbelievable.
Awesome.
So I agree with your comments about leveraging up to get your dream home. I just refinanced and I got a 90% of my money out and 30-year fix at 2.25.
Wow.
90%
90% of my money out and 30-year fix at 2.25.
Wow.
90%
90.
Oops. Yeah, I'm super jealous because I could only get 75%. And even then they cheated me because they didn't give me an appraised value, a legitimate appraised value. So it's actually less than 75. And I know we're live. And and 3.75. That's Puerto Rico. It's the best I could do. All right, here we go. Or not. Come on, connect.
The Radical Fundamental Principles of Freedom.
What happened there?
Rational self-interest and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Memorial Day weekend, on a Sunday night. I hope everybody's having a fantastic weekend. I am not, so I hope you guys are, because I've been 3 days now straight. You know, I thought I'm renting a place in the same building as I just bought a condo. And I thought, well, it's not going to be a big deal. We'll just pack up the stuff in the condo and schlep it up to the new place. 3 days of up and down and up and down and up and down and packing and organizing and throwing junk out and all of that. And tomorrow we have to be done. So one more day to go. And then we'll be in this condo, which is under construction. This background, enjoy it while you can, because it won't last forever. It'll last probably for the next couple of weeks. I will get a bookcase back there and we'll improve. Right now, this is the new camera, so I think the image is sharper, but it's purposefully blurred in the background. So it's very out of focus in the background, which is the way it's supposed to be. But we will have that bookcase soon to cover that back wall. Let's see what else can I tell you. Anyway, that's been my weekend. I don't think I've gone out to eat basically, but other than that, nothing. I'm losing pound. This is the best diet possible. Is who has time to eat? You're moving stuff and you're physical all the time. It's great. One more day. All right. And I'm breathing dust, right? There's dust everywhere. The air conditioning just circulates the dust around the house. It's basically what it's doing. All right, so today we've got quite a group joining me here for our contributor Q&A. Thank you all guys for the support, and of course, thank you for being here tonight. So we are, as usual, going to go through the panel here. You can also ask questions on the super chat. You can, of course, support the show on the super chat. It looks like Alejandrina has taken this Sunday evening off, so she won't be bugging you to ask the super chat questions. So hopefully you'll do it without Alejandrina. We don't, equal is unfair. Okay, let's see. So let's get us started. Jim, you get us started.
Hello, Yaron, and hello, everybody out there. Yeah, please do get the questions started on the super chat. As you can see, I'm getting pretty red. I've been out all weekend in Miami's sun working on my new Miami Revealed YouTube channel. It's been a lot of fun. As I mentioned before the show, I don't have a whole lot lined up for you. I've got a very simple question to ask you. What are your thoughts on the current state of inflation in the economy? It seems like a whole lot has changed over just the last month.
Well, it's so hard to tell. We've seen a series of numbers suggesting that inflation's ticking up. It's still relatively low. So we're looking at maybe 3%, maybe 3.5%. Inflation's such a tricky number to measure. The way we measure it today is not the way we measured it in the 70s, certainly not the way we measured it in the 30s. The basket has changed, but also the methodology has changed. And then the Fed looks at a different inflation measure than what we all get reported. We get the CPI, which is not the same as what the Fed is tracking. Commodity prices seem to be going up, but that's hard to tell if that's price inflation or if that's just a response to increased demand in Europe and the United States. So China is going to overdrive producing stuff, and that is driving up commodity prices. Hard to tell if that's long-term or short-term. But, you know, overall, my prediction for the US economy hasn't changed. I mean, we're heading towards what I think is stagnation. We might get a burst of growth here in the first year, but that's just to get us back to where we were, right, pre-COVID. You might get a burst of growth, but overall, everything the government has done is aimed and geared at slowing down economic growth. So to the extent that entrepreneurs are still working hard, to the extent that there's a lot of innovation still going on, that keeps things going. But fundamentally, the economy is hampered by massive regulations and by misallocation of capital. And that's the biggie. And that's the one you can't measure, you can't show, you can't point to, because it's the secondary and third level effect. But what's really going on with all the printing of money is that money is misallocated towards projects and investments and people that should not be getting the money. And therefore you have a distorted and perverted economy. And at some point you're going to have an inflation. You know, the government only has basically 3 ways to pay back the debt. It can dramatically raise taxes, but it's not even clear that that would be enough, particularly if interest rates go up, right? And it's not clear that there's the political will to dramatically raise taxes, because you can't get it from the rich. So this would involve raising taxes on everybody, including the middle class and the poor. The second option is to inflate. The challenge with inflating is that drives up interest rates, which drives up the cost of debt, which makes the debt even less sustainable. And you're trying to catch up, right? You're constantly trying to catch up. And the third option is default, which I think is the most rational option ultimately, and the most just option. You hold government debt, you know, turns out it wasn't riskless after all. But, you know, for the United States, the default on debt would be unprecedented in American history. It would be unprecedented in global history. It would be a shock to the global financial markets like we've never seen before. So there's no good outcomes for all that is going on right now. But certainly mild inflation is what the Fed wants, and mild inflation is probably what the Fed will get.
Quick little side note too. You reminded me that the Roosevelt administration arguably did default on debt when it took us off the gold standard and simultaneously revalued gold, and also forced a change in all contracts that were priced in gold previously to be priced in dollars.
It wasn't technically a default because they paid off all the debt. They just didn't pay it in gold. They paid it in dollars, and they inflated it. So that would be what the government does. It inflates it basically devalues the currency, which is what inflation is. But yes, to the extent that you deflate it in terms of dollars, that's what will happen. All right,
thank you,
Jennifer.
Do you think that the Second Amendment was written at the time the way it was, mentioning the militia, having a militia, because maybe of what had just happened with the revolution, and also maybe because back then the government, the weapons they had were basically the same as what regular people had. They didn't have F-16s and nuclear bombs and stuff. So
yeah, I definitely think that's the case. I mean, the founders were concerned about the ability of the people to rebel against their government if the government became authoritarian. Remember that one of the things that the British tried to do, Concord and Lexington, was to confiscate the arms of the militia, local militia. And that's when the first real battle of the War of Independence happened. It was less in terms of self-defense, which I think what a proper Second Amendment would be focused on, and more in terms of the ability of the people to rebel against an authoritarian government. And I think you're absolutely right. At the time where the weapons were about the same, where you could rebel and could win, I think the situation today is very different, and they would write the Second Amendment in very different ways.
So do you think there should still be one that just says people should be able to have guns for self-defense? Because if there wasn't one, they could just take them away again.
Yeah, I think there should be one that better defines the kind of guns and in what context those guns are held. I mean, you could imagine something in a constitution that gave you the right to rebel, that replaced the militia, but exactly how that would be, I don't know. I mean, we'd have to get a legal scholar on to figure that one out.
Okay, thank you.
Complicated. Darius, thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, Ron. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to come on and support you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Great. All right, Matt.
Okay, so I tried watching the debate with a Marxist with Ashley, and I made it through her initial monologue, and I just couldn't anymore. It was just, couldn't figure out a single coherent point, but it did remind me of a recent video I saw of a Venezuelan migrant at the U.S. border being interviewed, and someone asked him, "What do you think of socialists in the United States?" And he just seemed shocked that that's even a thing. And his answer is, well, they shouldn't be here. They should go to Venezuela. What are they still doing in America? Perfect. And he points around him in his whole backpack, said, my whole life's in this backpack. But these are all middle class and upper class people here who could sell a house, sell a car, and pay their way to get here. So why do you think, what's the real reason why any Marxist has not moved to Cuba or North Korea or China? And I wasn't alive, in previous decades, but were there lots of American Marxists or other people around the world moving into the Soviet Union? Did that happen? It happened very, very few, though. Very, very few. Well, I mean, for a number of reasons. One is none of those are the real thing. We'll get it right the next time. The second is we need Marxism everywhere. She actually, at some point in the debate, said that the reason the Soviet Union failed is that Marxism doesn't work on a national basis. It has to be global, right? It has to be everywhere, which is a great built-in excuse for it always failing, because when are you going to get it all over the world? That's absurd. But no, I mean, they don't want to leave their cushy existence and go and have to, live in Venezuela or in the Soviet Union or in Mao's China. They know, at some level, they know how good they have it. I had an uncle who was a communist, and he was what you call the armchair communist. He was middle class, and he hung out in England and then later in Portugal, and he talked the talk for a while, and he landed up marrying an aristocrat, a Portuguese aristocrat. And somehow the communism faded away. And he spent the rest of his life searching for his Jewish roots or whatever. So yeah, it's an ideal they don't really want to achieve. They don't really want to achieve. But she was more, I don't know, sophisticated is not the right word, but
first of all, she knew Marx better than most Marxists. And second, because of that, she had a great appreciation for capitalism. Of course, Marx was very pro-capitalist. He just thought socialism would ultimately, through evolution, replace it. But at the time, he recognized all the benefits that capitalism had provided. And he actually claimed that capitalism would make it possible for socialism to arise, right? Because we got so rich that we could have an equal society. She had a better understanding of that aspect of Marx, but then she whitewashed a lot of what he said and what it meant. She was very much into whitewashing his record.
One fascinating part was where she said, oh, a lot of people don't realize that he was descriptive, not prescriptive, which I understood. Does that mean like she views him as a historian? That's what, descriptive means, okay, so he's just describing the world. Well, that's a historian or that's not.
There's a sense in which he's describing the world, because what Marx believes is that it's everything's deterministic. So what he's describing is inevitable. What he's prescribing is inevitable. So it's not really a prescription because it's going to happen anyway, whether there's a Marx or not, right? So because capitalism has to turn into socialism, that's inevitable. It's not because he advocated for it. It's because of the nature of capitalism.
He's just giving us a heads up of what's coming.
Sense. Now, it's not, no determinist. It's like what's his name? Sam Harris telling you that he wants you to choose to believe there's no free will. Like, then what does it mean to choose, right? He wants you to be, choose to be a moral person, even though you're not really choosing. And by the way, he'll tell you there's no I, there's no you, right? Because there is no individual consciousness. So the same with the Marxists. I mean, he's describing, but he's really prescribing. And he has a lot of prescriptions in there. But there is that confusion once you become a materialist. What's the point in prescribing if you're a determinist materialist? It's all written already. It's all predestined. It's all determined. It doesn't matter. All right. Thanks, Matt. Daniel.
Thank you, Ron. After a long and expensive proxy fight, Exxon now has 2, maybe 3 climate activist shareholders on the board of directors. One thing I read out of Harvard Law says shareholders and activist investors are increasingly taking environmental, social, and corporate governance factors into consideration when making investments, and big businesses have been scrambling to adapt to a world where their bottom line is no longer the sole driver of their valuation.
Yep.
So if Exxon shareholders have decided that ESG is more important to them than profits, is this the end of Exxon and every company that the shareholders follow behind?
It's Chevron and some other companies too. They're doing the same thing.
Well, it's everywhere. I mean, this is how capitalism will kill itself. The capitalists will kill it themselves. But yeah, I mean, it started with BlackRock. Is it BlackRock or Blackstone? I always get those two confused. Anyway, the largest institutional investor, the largest mutual fund company in the world, they announced, was it 2 years ago, I think, that they will be using these ESG principles, ideas, they're not really principles, in making investment decisions. And they will be using proxy fights to try to change corporate culture, to try to influence boards of directors to adopt these kind of all kinds of leftist ideological issues. They're using property rights in order to do this. They're using the system, the capitalist system, in order to do it. And unless enough, and that's probably what happened with Exxon. My guess is BlackRock is a massive owner. They probably voted for this because They're into ESG. It's a mess, and it's getting worse. And I don't see how you get out of it once you get started. Because
I'm actually invested in ExxonMobil too, and I just got inundated by all this proxy vote stuff from all these third parties, these minority shareholders pushing this so hard.
And the problem is that the biggest investors in the country are pension plans.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just any pension plans, it's public pension plans. And public pension plans, so like COPAs, which is the largest investor in the US, and COSTERS, which is like the second largest. They're both California pension plans, public pension plans. They are not divorced from politics. The governor sits on the board, and the boards are political. So you get the largest institutional investors, and investors who give BlackRock a lot of money, and who give people like me who run a hedge fund a lot of money. And then they tell people like me, we don't want you to invest our money in companies that are not XYZ, ESG, or whatever, right? What are you supposed to do as a hedge fund guy or as an investment professional, right? When your largest investors do that. So I really do think this is, the flip side of this. The flip side of this, I saw this post on John Cochran's website. It showed three portfolios. The first portfolio was a growth portfolio. But it was basically it was 3 different mutual funds or 3 different ETFs. I don't remember, but basically. And one was growth, indexed, and very, very low fees. The second one was environmentally responsible, but not all out, modified a little bit. We take the social responsibility seriously, right? All offered by the same firm, by the way. The third one was, oh no, we're in this to save planet Earth, and your investments will be saving planet Earth, right? So 3 basically kind of indexy things, but with these 3 different mandates, right? And the second one, you paid a significant premium on the fees, and the third one, even higher premium on the foot, right? Then he shows the 20 largest investments of each of them. And they're all invested in exactly the same thing. I mean, literally. First 5 exactly the same. The rest may be change of order, but they're all the same thing, right? So everybody's got Apple, because Apple's zero carbon, and Apple's a growth stock, and Apple's this, and But literally all 3 portfolios are the same. So it's all marketing. Now the Exxon thing obviously is beyond marketing, but there's a lot of marketing. There's a lot of virtue signaling. There's a lot of this stuff, and how much it affects actual corporate behavior, it's going to take a long time for us to know and to see. And, of course, by the time that happens, it might be too late, but for now, a lot of it is show.
Okay. Well, certainly Exxon is saying they support the efforts to try to be carbon neutral by 2050.
Sure. Why not say that? What's the downside of saying that? And all companies have always been pretty, always invested in alternatives, because they've always looked for other angles to make money.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Hi, Deborah.
Hello, Yaron.
Hey.
So I have a question about literature to take things in maybe a more benevolent direction. Being that I was educated in government schools, I didn't ever learn that skill of.
Ooh, I lost you there.
Of a novel.
I lost you.
Yeah.
I lost you. Like being that I was educated in government schools, and then I lost the rest of it.
Yeah. I didn't ever learn even really what a theme was or how to figure out what a theme of a work is. So anyway, I've been trying to learn that as the remedial.
You're breaking up again.
By Victor Hugo. And so I'm trying to see if I've got it right, what the theme of that was. Have you read that book, and would you say that you're confident about knowing that before I ask?
Say it again, which book? Because you broke up there.
The Man Who Laughs.
The Man Who Laughs. Oh my God. I mean, I read it a long, long time ago. Could I create the theme of it right now? Probably not.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll ask a different question then.
Sure, but I would recommend that, and you're probably doing this already, but if I'd recommend Leonard Peikoff's 8 Great Plays. I don't know if you've listened to those.
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's my favorite. It's one of my favorites. It's one of Leonard's favorites, but it's where he basically takes eight plays and shows you how to break it down and gives you the plot theme, the characterizations, and then the theme, the philosophical theme, the whole thing. He goes step by step, and it's amazing. And you'll learn a huge amount from it. You'll learn how to do it, not just on a play, but you can do it for movies. You can do it in a novel, and any art form that has a conceptual side to it, you can do it.
That's what I need, because I've been just trying to figure it out for myself and maybe making progress, but that kind of structured instruction, that I think that'll help me a lot, so I can enjoy literature a lot better.
Yeah, 8 Great Plays is fantastic, and the plays are wonderful. So you get to read the play and then hear Leonard Peikoff's kind of explanation of them and dissection of them. So it's a lot of fun.
Great, thank you. I'll check that out.
Sure. All right, let me do a couple of Super Chat questions and then we'll go back to you guys. Somebody writes, if you got a sidekick, it would ruin the show. Sidekicks are for people who don't take ideas seriously and just want a few extra laughs from the audience. Yeah, but I'd make more money. So, God, this philosophical purity and stuff. What's up with that? Oh, wait. Yeah. I mean, I'm kidding about a sidekick. And if I had one, it would be for one show a week or something. I tried to do that with Amy for a while. But yeah, we'll see. Which reminds me, Amy, I need to have Amy on the show to talk about Paula. We'll try to do that this week. The arbitrary is determined to be neither true nor false. But it isn't clear to me how this interacts with the law of excluded middle. Is it because the arbitrary is outside of the realm of logic that there is no conflict? Yes. The arbitrary is not cognition. It's just sound. It has no cognitive standing because it's not linked to anything in reality. It doesn't provide evidence. It doesn't provide a hint. It's just an arbitrary. There's a gremlin under my desk. There's nothing for you to, an invisible gremlin. I have to make it invisible because otherwise you could find it, right? There's an invisible gremlin under my desk. There's nothing you can do with that. And I mean, you could ask, how do you know? And I'd say, I feel it. I have faith. And there's nothing you can do with that. It's a non-statement. It means nothing. So it's outside of the realm of logic. It's outside of the realm of thinking. It's not a thought. The arbitrary is not thinking, right? Now you have to be careful not to brush aside anything as the arbitrary. You have to make sure it really is arbitrary. But if there's no evidence, if there's no pointing to anything in reality, if there's no facts related to this, then there's nothing your mind can do with it. There's no there. There's no where to go cognitively. And that's why the rules of logic in a sense, don't apply because it's not cognition. Rules of logic apply to cognition. All right. Those are the two $20 questions. We'll keep going. All right, Jim. Oh, you didn't have any questions, so we'll skip Jim.
I've got one now.
Oh, go for it.
Daniel, I want to thank you for your Exxon question. That reminded me too that that has been on my mind this week because I've been watching this proxy war that's been going on, and it's got me thinking this past week. You know, especially with the announcement that looks like the environmentalists have gotten some wins with an Exxon. It's occurring to me that a combination of this sort of corporate activism that's been going on, plus the Biden administration's actions, I'm starting to think, and I like your opinion, Yaron, that we're going to go back to relying more on OPEC nations for their oil.
I mean, maybe it's hard to tell. Fracking is still happening. You know, they haven't stopped fracking yet. If they do that, then yes, I think that's right. No, I mean, I worry that yeah, oil prices will go up. But more importantly, in a sense, car prices will go up. It's going to become more and more difficult to find a good car, all combustion. And then when you get electric cars, and they're going to force us to go into electric cars, I think in California, just within a few years, where they're going to get their electricity. California can't handle the load right now in the summer with air conditioning. Now add to that cars that are suddenly being charged. Where's that electricity going to come from? Where are they going to produce it? How are they going to, the grid cannot sustain it. Now it's true Biden wants a $2 trillion so-called infrastructure bill to build the grid, but you still have to produce the electricity. And it's not coming from, so as we go into the next couple of decades, expect more blackouts, expect much higher electricity prices, expect much higher automobile prices, and with everything that's involved with that, right? I mean,
you need to use the gremlins under your desk as a power source.
Well, I mean, the good thing is that, you know, Tesla is selling you batteries you can have at home, so you can charge them off the grid and keep the battery for when the power goes out and use the Tesla battery. But note that that is a cost of electricity, which won't be calculated according to your monthly bill, but it's to put a Tesla battery in your home, which I would do, is a cost of electricity.
I've heard that, I don't know if this is actually the case yet with electric cars, but I know it's been proposed that they keep something like a 10 or 20% reserve on the batteries, that when they're plugged in at home, that the power company can actually tap off of your car battery as a backup source of energy for the grid.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I looked at some point in Southern California about getting solar panels. And they come and they give you this pitch and you get tax credits and all this stuff. And I said, okay, I'm kind of, I wouldn't mind. I think this would be a good idea if I could run the house off of the solar panels. And he was like, no, that's not allowed. You can't do that. I said, what do you mean? They're on my roof. No, the only way you can connect the solar panels is to the grid. You sell the electricity to the electric company and they sell it back to you. And yeah, he said your electric bill will go to zero, but you cannot have a switch that connects your solar panels to your home. I said, the only reason I want this is if there's like the 8.0 earthquake in California and the power goes out, I want to be able to run my house on the solar panels. Can't do that. Not allowed to do that. So.
Amazing.
So yes, all the electricity is it's shared. It's all going to go back onto the grid and be circulating. And that technology exists because of the solar panels, because they're buying from homeowners. They could leech off of your car if they wanted to.
Thanks to politicians for working us towards the dumbest possible grid.
Yes, but it's a smart grid. It's called the smart grid. All right, Jennifer.
I was reading about this Greek philosophy, this political idea. It's called anacyclosis or something, where the politics go in cycles. Like there's a monarchy, and then he gets kicked out, and then there's an oligarchy, and then there's a democracy, and then the mob comes, and then authoritarian figure comes around again. And obviously, it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, it sounded like it was determined to be like that. But do you think there's any truth that that does happen, like in history, and why that would be?
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain logic to it, right? And I think the Greeks articulated this, and other thinkers have, and that is that, you know, authoritarians, even benevolent dictators. Okay, so you have one benevolent dictator, maybe the second one's a little less benevolent, and then power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So you get a real tyrant. So people rebel against the tyrant, and they establish, let's say, a democracy. And now people vote, and early on that goes well because everybody's kind of on the same mindset, and they all want kind of, they fought together, and they all care, and they're engaged, and it works for a while. But slowly, democracy is corrupted by the fact that the majority can subjugate the minority. So it does. So then, you know, that people rebel against that, and they demand something more, you know, authoritarian, as we're seeing right now, right? And the cycle starts up again. So yeah, devoid of ideas, that's what happens. And you can see that in history. You can see that in the history of Greece. You can see that in Rome, although Rome is more complicated what happened there. You can see that you know, the monarchies, the attempts at republics, the short lifespans. We haven't seen many examples of real democracies other than Greece and more modern times. But that's because there's always ideas that interfere with the cycle. Christianity in the Middle Ages that gave kings the divine right, well, later gave them the right of kings. You had the Holy Roman Empire, you had a pope, you had people who had authority from above. It was very difficult to overcome that, the power that they had. And then you had an enlightenment that basically created a intellectual foundation for freedom that was not just democracy, and therefore could sustain itself a lot longer. 250 years is pretty long for a system to last. But there's a certain logic to it in the sense that every one of those systems is flawed. So at some point that flaw manifests itself, and there's a counter response, and the new system has a flaw in it. And ultimately that flaw will play out, and there's a revolution against it, and it counterplays like that.
But the American system, they did the best way that has ever been done, right?
Yeah, and we're still drifting away.
Yeah, and the founding fathers were afraid of that right from the beginning.
They knew it was a real possibility, real possibility. All right, Darius, you still nothing?
I'll just say I really have been enjoying the content. I want to thank you once again for all the great episodes. I really like. I especially appreciated that you put together that history behind that dispute going on in Gaza. That was really interesting and helpful. And for what it's worth, I really enjoy this new time of this episode right now. I know it's not permanent, but as a West Coast person, 12 noon, as the weather gets nicer, that becomes more and more difficult for me.
Yeah, true enough. Yes, I mean, this might be a more permanent time. We'll see how the time unfolds.
Sounds good.
All right, good. Thanks, Darius. Daniel.
Companies that are publicly held and produce physical goods are required to, well, there originally was a requirement based on Frank Dodd to list conflict minerals that are in their products. I think in the US, it's like tungsten, tin, gold, and something else, tantalum. In a capitalist country, how would companies deal with conflict materials, things that are produced by slave labor, child labor, stolen, whatever? How would that be dealt with?
Well, I mean, I think they try to avoid it to the extent that you could. They'd really try not to use them. And I think consumers would demand that, right? I mean, one of the things about capitalism is that I think if you give consumers responsibility around these kind of things, rather than have the government step in and the government be responsible for everything, then I think they will take it. And I think that they will, that the consumers will insist, look, if you want me to buy these things, we'd like to know, or maybe there'd be certificates, or maybe there'd be companies that certified where the materials came from. And maybe the company could explain, well, we'd like not to be able to do it, but it's the only source, or something like that. So I think it would be much more of a debate and a discussion. Whereas today we just assume government's taking care of it. And other than a few activists, nobody really cares. It reminds me about the Exxon.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things is, and I said this a few shows back, and it's becoming more and more real to me. The extent to which the left are activists. They don't just talk. They don't just sit on their hands. They start hedge funds that put pressure on companies. They try to rise up. They put pressure on CEOs. They march. They pamphleteer. They write letters to editor. They write. They are active. Whereas generally, the right is not.
And they're very successful at it. The company that actually brought those activists in to Exxon has like 0.02% of the stock.
Yep.
They
have the moral high ground.
They have the higher moral ground, and they can
over a long time. But they're active. They're constantly hustling to get their ideas across. And that's something people on the right don't do, including Republicans, right? They just don't do.
Well, and to a large degree, it isn't just getting ideas out, but getting people in place, whether in universities or public education, in corporations, in government.
Yep. And then what's that?
Would we want people on the right to be as active? I mean, if you're talking about like the Trump type.
Well, not today's rights. No, I mean, not today's rights.
Good point.
Remember that descriptive versus prescriptive?
Yeah, but one of the complaints Republicans have is, why do we keep losing? You keep losing because you're not fighting. You keep losing because they have a better game plan. But yes, I don't want the current right to be, I mean, they're already too activist for my taste.
Ellsworth too, he spent years sprinkling his people around the banner, and nobody cared one by one. Absolutely. And then came in very handy with the strike and the corporate takeover in the end.
Absolutely. And that's what the left has done for 100 years. They sprinkled their people everywhere. But it's more than that. It's that they get out the streets and they make a noise. All right, Matt.
Okay, so I'm going to go up one level in terms of debates that I enjoyed. This is a little bit better. The mouthy debate.
Okay.
Way too much statistics, out of him. I know you were just getting bashed with that and kind of felt probably like you had to deal with it since he kept throwing it out there. But it just, kept reminding me of the conflict of debating concretes versus principles. And he was all about these concretes. And then that's just like, well, the communist who said, well, that's anything that's wrong. Well, that's not pure communism. And we do hear similar things along anything that's wrong with capitalism, blame the mixed economy. And, and there's some truth to that. Oh, well, capitalism's never been, preached perfectly. The same people say the same thing with Christianity, or, oh, well, yes, the 30 Years' War was terrible, but that's not real. That's not real Christianity. But that reminds me that capitalism is not a primary. It comes downstream from more basic ideas and philosophy, which can be objectively proven. And, so that's what concretes versus principles, and then capitalism being downstream from, philosophy.
That's right. I mean, it's the problem is that when you debate these guys, they don't want to talk principles. They keep going back to the data. And again, you're really after their audience. So you have to say something about their data, because their data is wrong. I mean, the nice thing about us is our principles are aligned with reality. So, and going deeper in terms of philosophical, they won't engage. It's like, I've had this experience so many times. I'd say something like, I'm concerned with moral people being successful and a morality of self-interest. And they go, yeah, we're all for self-interest. Socialism, that's where the self-interest is. That's where happiness is, right? And that's what she did with the Marxism. She said, oh, we Marxists, we care about self-interest just as much as you do. It's just that this is the way to reach self-interest, is through communism. And it just blows you away that they actually hold that, but they do.
And they're never satisfied that in a free society, if you want to set up a commune, go for it. You're free to do so.
Say that to them every time, and they don't care, because they want you to live under socialism. They don't want anybody out there to be exploited, because they view that as an injustice. They're very committed to the cause of justice.
The stats and studies, people just start hammering that. Always makes me think of this scientist quote of where he said that the great danger of our time is knowing enough to think we're right, but not knowing enough to know that we're wrong.
Yep.
And he was a pretty smart guy. He seemed good, like he's good at math. He's an intelligent person, but he's just in that sweet spot of not knowing quite enough to know that this can all be manipulated.
Absolutely. And the thing about stats is, oh God, can they be manipulated? It's so easy. It's so easy. And once it gets published, it's gospel until the next publication comes out, but it's gospel. And I mean, in the social sciences now, there's this, they call it the crisis of reproduction. They can't reproduce the results. So people try to do exactly the same study as these other, as a published paper. They can't get the same results. And it's a massive problem. Something like 2/3 of all studies are not reproducible, which means it's bullshit. I mean, plain and simple bullshit. And it's just, but it doesn't stop anybody. They come up with, the thousands of professors writing thousands of articles in hundreds of journals, and it's a machine, and it just churns stuff out.
Yep.
Deborah, you are frozen. Video is frozen. Let's see if we can hear you.
Okay, let's, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Yep.
Okay. Maybe I'll just shut my video off if it's frozen and try. Yeah, so my question is, well, maybe it's more of an observation. People seem to really be drawn to conflict. I see these questions keep reemerging in the super chat. Questions for you about some kind of a conflict involving Carl Barney. I don't know the details of it, and I don't want to. But they can't let it go. People can't let it go. And I gather that there's quite a rabbit hole that one could go down if one wanted to obsess about it and read like so-and-so's blog post and so-and-so's whatever. But this is not just objectivists acting this way. It's a human thing. It's this fundamental attraction to conflict, and it's almost like they want to keep poking it and stoking the fire because it's entertaining, or there's something gratifying about watching it, and I don't quite know what to make of that. So I guess it's more of a general, what do you think about that?
Yeah, now my video is frozen. Can you guys see me on Zoom?
Yep, you're
I
good.
guess on YouTube, it's frozen on YouTube.
Oh yeah, it is on YouTube.
Not sure why.
Oh, there it's going now.
It's going now? Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a phenomenon generally among human beings of a certain fascination with car wrecks, right? You know, we slow down to see the car wreck, irrelevant to our lives, doesn't affect anything we do. There's nothing really particularly interesting to see on the other side, but people slow down and cause massive traffic jams because they're slowing down to see a car wreck in the other lane that has nothing to do with them in the other direction. Right?
And now in California, the police weave back and forth on the road and cause cars to slow down so that there's not a second collision after the first from people doing exactly what you say.
Yep, yep, it drives you crazy. So there's definitely a certain fascination with things going bad. We're conditioned to that by the media, which focuses only on the bad news. Bad is interesting. Bad is unusual. Bad is, you know, it's just. And I really do think it's conditioning. We don't think much. We don't appreciate much the good. We don't devote time to the good. And again, it's in the news. It's among objectivists. I mean, everybody's very quick to criticize anything. Very slow to compliment, right? And Leonard Peikoff in his talks about justice says the most important aspect of justice is to support the good. And yet it doesn't matter. 90% of objectivists are focused on the negative, focused on, oh, you made a mistake. You know, when I say something that's wrong, like in the first David Pakman debate I did with David Pakman, I said something about Rand's view of metaphysics, and I was wrong. Oh my God. The number of objectivists who I never hear from, not here, probably don't even support the show. The number of emails I got, you know, what is the point you're on of going on these shows if you're going to screw up, you know, and just on and on and on. It's like when I do great interviews, I don't know, Lex Friedman, I never hear a peep from them, not a word. But you screw up once, everybody's on your case. So it's a real problem within objectivism. It's broader in terms of human beings. And I don't know exactly why. It's partially this focus on the negative that's in the news in our lives. It's partially a misunderstanding of the concept of justice. We think of justice in terms of criminal justice, punishing the bad, instead of justice being treating people the way they deserve, and much more important to treat the good the way they deserve than others. Yeah, it's definitely a phenomena out there, and it's partially envy that exists in our culture. People want to see you fail. They relish when you fail. They don't want to see too much success because maybe it says something about their own life. So when you fail, in a sense, they celebrate. It shows that you hear this in the culture generally. You too are human, right? You failed, so you're human as well. So now it makes me feel better. So because I fail sometimes, and now I know you fail, so it makes me feel better. And your achievements don't make me feel better because then I think, why am I not achieving as much? Right? So there's a little bit of envy, resentment. There's a lot of people out there who, for whatever reason, don't like the Ayn Rand Institute or don't like me. And this thing with Carl and Craig is just an excuse for them to say, yeah, I knew something was wrong with those guys. Oh yeah, this is the opportunity we can gang up on them and beat them up, and they relish it, and that's why they want to pick at it. They want to constantly ask about it because to them it's in some sense reaffirming.
I get the impression that some of it is a natural effect of groups. Factionalism seems to happen in every group.
Now there's a different issue though. And that is the issue of schisms, the issue of splits, the issue of that I think is completely natural, completely to be expected. And it happens in every intellectual group out there. I don't know a single intellectual group, movement, that doesn't have massive numbers of schisms. It's funny that the libertarians always make fun of objectivists for having so many schisms. The libertarians are fighting all the time. And they don't talk to one another. Like Cato doesn't talk to von Mises, and they don't talk to this, and they don't talk to that. And then Rothbard pissed off half the libertarian movement. It wasn't just Ayn Rand. A lot of people didn't like Rothbard and didn't want to have anything to do with him. The two people who founded the public choice theory, Buchanan and, guy's name's going to pop out of my head. They kind of founded it together. They created this whole way of thinking about economics together. Didn't talk to one another for like 50 years after they did this, right? They lived into old age, didn't talk to one another. Neocons fight among each other all the time. Marxists fight among each other all the time. People who take ideas seriously have disagreements and split over those disagreements because they take ideas seriously. Then add to that the fact that sometimes you just don't like somebody. Like, the fact that we're all objectivists doesn't mean we have to like each other. I mean, hopefully we like some of us. We're not all going to get along. We're not all going to like each other. We're not all going to be friends. We're not all going to be buddies. And sometimes some objectivists just piss me off and I don't like them. And then there's issue of morality. Sometimes somebody will do something that's immoral. They might be an objectivist, but they're still immoral. And you might point it out to them and they don't fix it. And you have to split with them, not because you disagree, but because you think what they did is unacceptable and you don't want to have anything to do with them, given what they did, right? You might disagree about strategy. You might disagree. There are a million reasons why you would fragment and splinter and spin off and so on. And not all of it's ideological. Could be ideological, but not all of it is. So so it happens every few years. It has at a high profile. It happens every day at a low level, and we just have to live through it. And
I think you're exactly right on this point, though, that we need to support the good. I don't agree with everything you say, Yaron. I'm sure you wouldn't agree with everything that I'd say, but I support what you do. I support what ARI does. You guys are doing good things, and it's important.
Yeah, and thank you. And that's right. And I think the focus needs to shift from, if what people are writing about the Ayn Rand Institute is right, then that would be really, right. That would be really bad. But all you have to do is read what they've written, and you can see the self-contradictions and the nonsense that is written there. And I think you can just dismiss it and move on and let's get on with life. There's a lot to do.
It's just arbitrary. If a couple people have a dispute with one another, and I am not privy to what took place, and then like one of them comes and says, "Hey, Debbie, Yaron's a real jerk. You wouldn't believe what he said." Like, for me, that's arbitrary. I didn't see it. I don't have any evidence. It's just noise, like you were saying earlier about the arbitrary, and I shouldn't engage with it.
Absolutely, and it's even more noise when they do it publicly, right? So why are they doing it publicly? If they had this dispute with Yaron, why is this public? What relevance does it have to my life? And why are they going? What's the motivation to go public? And I think the motivation here to go public is quite clear. The motivation is to get me off the board and to replace the management and to replace the people at ARI with his people. Fine. I don't think he's going to be very successful. He can try, but yeah, I don't think people should. I think you read it. If it makes sense, fine. But I think in this case, it just doesn't make any sense. So I think the solution is to move on. But a lot of people don't want to move on.
Well, it is. I think that's one of the things I find so refreshing about Lex Friedman is he's so positive. He'll make a comment about like, I like to think about how awesome it is just to be alive. You know, it's like, why not think about something like that? Like, one feels better when thinking about something like that than, oh, somebody said something nasty about someone else. I want to know more about that. It's like better for me, selfishly, to have that orientation.
Absolutely. And his orientation is also, there's a lot of knowledge out there I don't have. There's a lot of interesting work people are doing out there. I want to interview them for the interesting work that they're doing, for the new knowledge that I will gain from it. So
yeah,
I mean, I like that approach. I like his approach a lot.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's do a couple of $20 super chats. Planet of the Humans is fairly left-wing, but it looks into the corruption and bad science and green energy. Crazy stuff like bio energy plants, burning trees on a massive scale. Yeah, I mean, I've seen Planet of the Humans. It's Michael Moore's movie. It's an interesting movie in the sense that basically what it says is the whole green movement is being corrupted. It's all a facade, and we're doomed because the world is indeed coming to an end, and there's actually nothing we can do about it. And the people who are pretending they have solutions don't know what they're talking about, and are actually, they're actually pulling one over you. So don't buy into it. But Micah Moore is honest, and he's in the sense that he says, no, to fix stuff, we have to shut down civilization. And a lot of people are going to have to die. Right? At least we know what he thinks. All right. Canada has passed vast pools of surplus oil reserves to export to the USA. No need for domestic shale oil or Saudi oil. They market themselves as the world's most ethical oil as they are developing leading carbon capture technology. Yeah, I mean, Canada has, but for example, we stopped the piping, what's the name of that pipeline that Biden stopped? And I guess Trump couldn't get built because it should be built by now.
Keystone pipeline.
The part of the challenge with Canada, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but I thought Canada's oil is difficult to refine. It's not, the Saudi oil is the cheapest oil in the world because it's very light, it's easy to refine, and it's close to the surface. You don't have to drill real deep. I think that the Canadian oil is easy to access, but it's mixed in with sand. It's very difficult to refine, but I might be wrong. I'm no expert on Canadian oil. All right, let's do another couple. Why is Sam Harris afraid to debate objectivists while Jordan Peterson is not? I don't think Sam Harris is afraid to debate objectivists. I think he has rejected objectivism as worthy of debate. I mean, I think he considers us beneath debating, not worthy of debating. Of course, it's his right to do that. I don't think it's an issue of afraid. I don't think Sam's afraid of that. Jordan probably has fewer bad experiences with objectivists, is probably more open about who he interacts with, has been a public intellectual for fewer years than Sam, is maybe less skeptical. Yeah, I think those are the reasons, but I don't think either one of them is afraid. I don't think that's the term I would use for Sam Harris at all. I don't think many people are afraid. I mean, I think some people on the left at some level realize objectivism is the real enemy. But I don't think Sam is there, and I don't think what's preventing him is fear. Do the bad guys know Ayn Rand will eventually, whoops, what happened? Oh, there it is. Do the bad guys know Ayn Rand will eventually be their downfall? I notice objectivism is starting to become less fringe. I think some of them do. Not so much in consciousness, not so much as they think that, is that it's in the background, because it's the one set of coherent ideas that actually challenges them. The left and the right have a lot in common. Neither has a lot in common with objectivism. And I think they know that.
I'm hearing a lot more people voicing support for capitalism as capitalism. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, so the few of them actually, as capitalism, know what that actual term means. Why don't you like the term opportunity cost? It seems so fitting. It's not clearly a cost. A cost is money out of my pocket. Here it's what could have been, what could have happened, what might have been. It's not exactly a cost, and I think it's wrong to think of it as a cost. I don't have an alternative formulation to replace it with. That's why I still use it. But it's like, I don't like the term human capital. Not because what human capital is capturing isn't real. It's because it's not capital, not in the proper sense of the term. So it's something that's important that we should talk about, but it's not capital. And the same here with opportunity cost. There's something that's being captured that relates to the opportunity. It's just not a cost, like an accounting cost. Can an overall rational person have irrational moments? What causes these breaches in principle? Sure. Of course you can have irrational moments. What can cause them? An overwhelming emotion that you find hard to overcome. It causes you to be irrational. You're super tired. You're fatigued. You just can't keep your mind in focus, and yet you're still out there functioning. You should be asleep or you should be resting, and you behave irrationally. Just bad choices. You decided today you're not going to make the effort, and you behave irrationally. Lots of reasons you could have irrational moments. Usually it's emotions. It's powerful emotions that overcome you, causing you to have an irrational moment. Okay, we got a $20 one, Canadian, but I'll count it. Why don't you get Dave Rubin to set up a debate with you and Jordan Peterson? What two leftist personalities would you like to debate in the future? When might it happen? I try to debate Cornel West. I'd like to debate Cornel West. I find Cornel West extremely intelligent and interesting for a leftist, but his speaking fee is very high. I'd like to debate Robert Reich, who I think is smart, and one of these people who know who the enemy is and know where it's coming from. He's never agreed to debate me. I think Paul Krugman's probably debating fee is too high, particularly if we're debating inequality. He likes to make money debating inequality. Who else would I like to debate? I'm going to be debating Richard Wolff, this Marxist economist, at University of Pennsylvania in October, probably. October 13th is the last date we were looking at. I mean, what I'd really like is intelligent leftists, like Cornel West. I'd love to debate Steven Pinker about capitalism and about reason, and about free will. Although I don't know that I am the best person to debate free will, and that's my issue with Jordan Peterson. I'm not quick in a debate context debating epistemological ideas. It's just not me, right? Now, I'm not saying I know who, somebody like Harry Binswanger would be very good in a debate like that. Harry and Jordan Peterson would be very good. But for me, I'm debating Vosh, something like that, who's this gamer, big gamer. I'm debating him on Saturday on Discord. I'm doing the debate on Discord. So I feel like Jordan and I we're not debating the same thing. I don't feel qualified to debate Jordan Peterson on the things that are most interesting to debate Jordan Peterson on. Psychology, evolutionary psychology, and epistemology. Like, I was a little stumped with the question when he said, you know, about the chair, something about a definition of a chair when we were at Ocon, which I just like, what are you talking about? I mean, that was my response, and I should have had a really good response to him. And if Harry Binswanger would have just come at him all like that, right? Because Harry's written a book called How We Know, and that's what it is. It's VAUSH. Yes, I'm debating VAUSH. I'm never debate people in order to convince them. Yeah, so I'm interested in debating interesting people, but my strengths are politics, economics, ethics. Epistemology is it's not my strength. It's not what I am and who I am. So I try to avoid debates on that. Now, if I studied, if I prepared, if I really invested in it, I could probably handle it, but I'd really have to invest in it. I'd like to debate Jordan Peterson on the Bible, on his stupid interpretations of the Bible. That would be fun. Okay. All right, let's do a quick round with you guys. Jim, if you have something.
Do you have any updates from your perspective on how things are going with Israel and Gaza and so forth?
It's quiet. You know, it sounds like they want to cut a deal so that the Palestinians could rebuild everything Israel destroyed, so that Israel can destroy it again in like 5 years. Literally, that was the headline. You know, Israel, Egypt, and the Palestinians discussing rebuilding Gaza. All right.
I was stunned for all of the bombing and such. They only killed, according to people in Gaza, something like 200 and some odd people. Like,
they called every single building is called in advance, told to evacuate, and they won't bomb until they evacuate. So
yeah, what's the point of pounding buildings?
It gets Hamas to stop for 5, 6, 7 years, and then they go at it again. And once they restock, yeah. I mean, the news out of Israel right now is that it looks like there will be a government for the first time in a long, long time without Bibi Netanyahu. So it looks like there'll be a national, across left and right, all the people who don't want Bibi Netanyahu to be prime minister are uniting, from the commies to the right-wing nationalists. They're forming a government that will exclude Netanyahu. So, and the other really cool thing about that is it's going to be a completely secular government. Other than the Islamists are going to support it. They're not going to be represented on the government, but they're going to support it. But no religious Jews allowed. So we might have a period in which this government undoes, hopefully, a lot of the subsidies and support and promotion of ultra-Orthodox Jewish religion in Israel. And that would be great if that actually goes through. So
on the attacks, were they very successful at killing fighters in the tunnels when they announced the ground attack?
It doesn't look like that was super successful for whatever reason. They're not sure. I haven't read anything where they explain why, but it looks like it wasn't as successful as they had hoped. All right, Matt.
So I listened to the episode with the intellectual property expert, and it was mostly centered on the pharmaceutical industry. And I thought it was entertaining and informative, and was really enjoying it and like basically agreeing with everything. And then he got to one part where he brought up, where I forget who brought it up, but it was about how American companies, charge X amount per pill, or drug in the United States, and they charge much, much less in other countries. And he just brushed it off as, oh, that's cost shifting. And then you dug into it a little bit more, and then he seemed very eager to change the subject on it, because that's, so I was agreeing with everything the whole time about, obviously, I don't support any of these regulations or interventions of governments in this, but given that the mixed economy does exist, that does just seem like a blatant ripoff of American taxpayers, and that are subsidizing cheap pills around the world. And he seemed very quick to want to move on from that.
Well, because there's nothing much you can do about it. So the reality is that in every other country in the world, or at least there isn't anything to do given the attitude of the American government, but every other country in the world negotiates the rate for the drug as a country. Indeed, the European Union does it as the European Union. So they basically go to the drug companies and say, okay, we're willing for you to have like a 5% profit. This is the price we want on the drug. And what's the drug company going to do? I mean, better 5% than zero. So they sell it to them. That's what Canada does. It's what Britain does. It's what all of Europe does. The only place in the world really that doesn't do that is the United States. Because here, your insurance company might negotiate, my insurance company might negotiate, and others, and they play them off and they get a decent price. They get a profit margin. And one of the things Trump wanted to do and Biden wants to do is allow Medicare to do the same thing the Europeans do. Medicare to negotiate as a Medicare. And then that would drive cost of drugs for Medicare down and would actually increase my drugs up. Because again, it would be cost shifting, right? Drug companies would have to make up the money somewhere. So if they're going to pay Medicare less, why do you think it costs so much money to go to the hospital in the United States as a private insured patient? Because Medicare has driven down the rates. So the hospitals have to make up the profit somewhere. So they're raising your rates.
Right, it's just more cost shifting. Yeah, obviously.
And the whole health industry globally is one big cost shifting, and there's not much you can do about it. There's not much, I mean, other than privatize, get away from government intervention. But it's horrible. Yeah. It truly is horrific.
Yeah. Quick side question. Imagine like sci-fi movies, there's one human and you got to do something and you can save like 1 billion people, but you're going to die in the process. When I see those situations, it always seems like obvious that, 1 billion people, sure, I would die to save that or save planet Earth or save the galaxy or whatever, but that's a very utilitarian mindset. But, I still feel tempted. Is that just my cultural upbringing? I feel like if I could save all planet Earth, you have this urge to do so.
Well, partially you're saving planet Earth, you'd save yourself. In a sense, right? If you don't do it, you die anyway. Partially you're saving people you love. But there is this famous example. If by cutting off your finger, you could stop an earthquake from happening in China that would kill 1 million people, would you cut off your finger?
Right, and it's tempting. At some point, there's some degree where it becomes more and more tempting.
I mean, if you're a concert pianist, would you cut off your finger?
Then you're changing the cost-benefit, ratio.
If you're 80 years old, would you cut off your finger? If you're 5 years old, would you cut off? I mean, you can't do this stuff because the standard is your values. And if you don't cut off your finger, you're a monster. No, it's my finger. To me, my finger might be worth more than 1 million people. Right? So but it's stupid questions because cutting off your finger would never stop 1 million people from dying. But the point is that it's an emergency situation. Pretty much anything you do is okay. And you have to take into account the context of the individual. What's it worth to?
Plus, there's nothing wrong or anti-objectivist about benevolence.
No, but benevolence doesn't mean you have to suffer.
Agreed, but I'm just saying, even if you're not obliged to sacrifice your finger or your life or whatever, that doesn't mean that there's necessarily something wrong with doing so out of benevolence.
Well, what does it mean to sacrifice your life out of benevolence? There
Out
is
of a love
benevolence,
for the
exactly.
people you're saving? I don't know.
Strangers? No, I would say it's irrational.
Yeah,
They're
it's
strange.
just an endless rabbit hole. You could say, well, what if you have terminal cancer and you only had a week to live anyway? Then would you do it? It could just keep getting more and
But
more
it's,
elaborate.
yeah, but those all, again, it's ridiculous kind of questions, but it's no, I mean, there's no benevolence to strangers that overrides the value of my life. Zero, zilch, none. Now, to people I love, yes, but that's not benevolence. If I see a drowning kid in a river, I'm doing the calculation of whether I'll survive saving him. And if I'm not surviving, I'm not saving him. That's not because I'm not benevolent. I'm super benevolent, but I value my life.
Yeah. And I agree. I watch a lot of sci-fi, and it bugs me that these are all contrived. They're all ridiculously contrived, and it's precisely to hammer this idea of self-sacrifice.
Yep.
There was a similar one called Stowaway on Netflix recently. It was the same thing. Someone, and they never explained how it happened, but they found a guy like in the ductwork or something of a spaceship who didn't know how he got there. And then there was only enough life support for the people who were supposed to be there. So then it ensued with this lifeboat type scenario. It's people like that kind of theme in movies for some reason.
Yeah, because it creates great drama, right? It creates big choices, and it appeals to the altruism. It's not about benevolence. It's about altruism in there. It's about you're not significant. 1 million people are. To whom and for what? I mean, the real question is, would you kill somebody else to save 1 million people? I mean, I can create some really complicated puzzles, right? Trolley questions. Right? You know, there's no end to them, but they almost never happen.
If you want to laugh, on Facebook, there is a trolley problems page that is just one humorous look at the trolley problem after another.
Yep. All right, let's see, Daniel.
Well, with apologies to Deborah, if we're done with these fluff questions, back to Belarus. So I think people know Belarus forced an airliner to land and arrested a journalist. Then since then, people like Air France and British Airways want flight paths around Belarus to go into Russia, and Russia's saying, no, you can't do that. You can't go around Belarus. Should Western companies go back to gunboat diplomacy and say, if you send your fighters up, even in your airspace, and you're going to force down an airplane for something that's not illegal in our country, we're going to scramble our fighters against your fighters, even though that's an act of war. You treat our people, our airliners, et cetera, with respect, or we're sending the military into your country.
Absolutely. I mean, they should have had airplanes in the air immediately as soon as the Ryanair told them that Belarus had planes. The British or the Germans, whoever was closest, NATO, should have had planes in the air. It's an act of war. You can't steal an airplane out of the air like that. And it's pathetic. The whole thing's pathetic. Now, the Russians, of course, this was all done with Russia's support. You have to be careful because the Russians have nukes, but at some point you just have to say to the Russians, step away. Otherwise, you're going to be caught in this. And Putin doesn't want to commit suicide. He just needs somebody to tell him to stop with a tough voice. He's a bully, just like every bully. If you're strong, if you're uncompromising, they will stop. And but nobody's done that. No American president has done that in a long, long, long time. And the Russians just feel like they can do anything.
They can do anything.
Yeah. I mean, look, I just read today that they're hacking us again. You remember that there was this big hack last year where they hacked into all the government agencies and everything. And they're doing it again. The same agency. It's from Russia. Everybody says it's from Russia. They seem to know it's from Russia. If that's not an act of war, I don't know what is. So, and yet nothing. Trump didn't do anything. Biden's not doing anything. It's like this country doesn't even exist. And it's everybody will blame it on Biden and forget that it's exactly the same thing happened under Trump. But yes, I mean, remember when the North Koreans shot down an airplane full of people? What was that, in 80s or 90s?
Yeah, 80s.
And what did the US do? Nothing. What did South Korea do? Nothing. This is before North Korea had nukes. Nothing. So.
Right. So, you know, back to Israel, they may not have much effect by bombing these buildings, but at least they're not a complete paper tiger, which we are.
Complete is the right word. They are paper tiger, just not complete. Yes. But they're quite a paper tiger. Because put yourself, imagine you live in Orange County, Daniel, right? Yeah. Imagine the rockets being fired on your neighborhood from Mexico every day, hundreds of them. Few people get killed, but they're rockets, and you're running to a raid shelter in and out. And your government calls up the people in Mexico and tells them, get out because we're bombing your building. Right? Yeah. This isn't even a plane in Belarus where they took 2 people. This is a country that has thousands of rockets flying in, and they can't take care of the threat. They won't put ground troops on the ground. They won't go kill everybody associated with this barbaric action. Right. It's just, they're so weak, and people think, I see it on the chat here. People think Netanyahu is some pro-Israeli super. Netanyahu is the ultimate wimp. He's been prime minister forever, lost at least 2 wars in Gaza and to Hezbollah. And I consider what he just did a loss, right? Because Israel's not better off.
He writes good books, though.
He writes great books, but he's a pathetic prime minister. Pathetic prime minister. Good riddance to him. I hope there's a realignment in Israeli politics away from Netanyahu, and it's somebody better who rises up from this. We'll see. Now, he's not as tough as the international community will allow. He's as tough as he's not tough. He's never been tough. He was friendly with Yasser Arafat in the late 90s when he was prime minister. He's never been tough except in his books. Even his father, who died like 3 years ago at age 104 or something, was super critical of Netanyahu being a wimp as prime minister. It's not an issue of you could blame everything in the world in the international community, but it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the will of the prime minister and the will of the Israeli people and the leadership skill and the communication skill of a prime minister. And a prime minister who is in trouble, who can't get the votes to become, he has to call 4 elections to try to manipulate the system to try to stay in power, is a weak prime minister and can't do anything. Last time he was replaced, it was an intifada is nonsense. And he was replaced ultimately by a much tougher guy. He was replaced ultimately by Alex Sharon, who was much tougher and much better. And you could argue Sharon didn't go all out because of the international community. But Bibi is a wimp, always has been. Again, gives a great speech. All right, Deborah.
So the scenario you presented just now, if Mexico were firing missiles at us, as you described, I actually think we would fight back.
I think we would too.
Yeah. So in that case, we're less of a paper tiger than Israel.
Well,
I can't imagine us not.
I think we'd fight back it's a question of, we'd fight back the first time. Would we get used to it like Israel has gotten used to it? Would we serve them such a blow that they wouldn't do it again? I don't think so.
No, we would make a proportional response.
We'd have a proportional response. We'd go in, we'd clean it up, we'd leave. 5 years later, they do it again. Would we then flatten them? No.
No, that's true. We'd
We
probably
have
do a
such
lot of nation building and charity, and we'd give them money, and we'd find some way to punish American citizens by adding security procedures at the airport, beyond whatever. But yeah, I'm sure it would be a mess, but we would do something.
And Israel not only, while these missiles were being fired, all the electricity in the Gaza Strip was being provided by power plants in Israel. All the
That's
water
crazy.
that they were drinking was being provided to pipes that came from Israel.
That's like someone's got a gun to your head and you're like, here, you need a sandwich? You look like you're getting tired. You want a cold drink of water so you can keep holding that gun to my head? It's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.
Altruism. Talk about altruism.
It's insane. So my question was just a very short one. Do you have, and if you do, what is it? A very favorite, number one favorite piece of music? Or is it more like that there's a lot and it's hard to, either way?
It's hard. There's a lot. It depends on my mood. So there's a lot.
Top five.
Top five. Even that's hard. But I'd say top five is something like, and it's probably easier to do a top 20, but it's something like Beethoven's 7th Symphony, Rachmaninoff's probably 3rd Piano Concerto, Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto, Brahms's 4th Symphony. What's the 5th one? Beethoven's 5th Piano Concerto. So tilted towards concertos, definitely.
Cool. I like those too.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, a 20 or 100, top 100 would be better, because I didn't get Tchaikovsky's piano trio in there, and there's so much chamber music that is just unbelievable. So it really does depend on the mood and kind of what you feel like. All right, Jennifer.
They're talking now in mainstream in the Congress about the COVID maybe being a leak. Could you have Bradley Thompson on to talk about that? He said he knew something about that.
COVID being what?
About a leak from the lab. And you said Bradley Thompson had been thinking that like months ago.
No, not Bradley Thompson. Who did I think?
Oh, it was somebody else.
It was somebody else. Matt Ridley.
Oh, Matt Ridley. Okay, Matt Ridley. Yeah.
Matt Ridley thought it a while ago, a few months ago. And the other person who thought it a few months ago was Brett Weinstein.
Oh, okay.
And again, it's not a man-made virus. It's a virus they took from a bat and they were playing around with it, right? In the lab, figuring out how deadly it was, figuring out maybe just moving stuff a little bit, maybe making it a little bit worse, right? But not artificially creating it. And it turns out in the US, the biological people who do this kind of stuff, it leaks all the time. They get sick all the time. Now, luckily, it's never really gotten out, but it's very, very hard to keep these labs tight. And there's a good chance that some of the lab technicians at this lab in Wuhan got sick in November of last year, and that they were the ones who first went to hospital, transmitted it there, and spiraled out of control from there. But they got sick in the lab from a virus they were playing with. They were experimenting on. That's the hypothesis anyway.
Thank you.
And it is a lab that the US had a relationship with.
Yeah.
It is true that the US provided, through the WHO, provided funds because the US has an incentive to study coronaviruses. So this lab was experimenting on coronaviruses and providing information to the US. Obviously, we didn't use any of that information. All right, let's see. We've got a bunch of super chat questions. Let's run through these quickly. Does it amaze you how many intellectuals are okay with saying things that make no sense? They must not think sense is a thing. Yes, it does not stop to amaze me, particularly when they say things that are obviously contradictions, Well, obviously contradict the facts of reality in history if they just wanted to open their eyes and see it. Is intellectual laziness stopping the spread of objectivism more than altruism? I think the two are related. Altruism encourages one not to be overly intellectually active. It puts a kind of in a sense, a stop sign. Don't go there. Don't think too much. Don't investigate too much. So I think the laziness is a consequence of altruism. But yeah, there is definitely intellectual laziness is a big challenge. What did you do right with your discussion with Jordan Peterson that Craig did wrong with Dennis Prager? I don't think I did much right in my discussion with Jordan Peterson. I don't think that was a particularly good discussion. And I think what Craig did wrong with Dennis Prager is that he presented himself as an ally of, I mean, I'd say two things. One, he presented himself as an ally of Dennis's with regard to the cause of liberty. I don't think he's an ally of Dennis's, or at least I don't think objectivism is an ally of Dennis's in the cause of liberty. Dennis is not on the side of liberty. That's one. The second is that he didn't go after religion enough. He was too friendly when it came to religion. Like Dennis, I just give you one example, and I didn't watch the whole thing, but this is one example from early on. Dennis Prager says something about all those communist atheists who killed millions of people. That's what atheism does. And first, to admit that communism and Nazi fascism are atheistic is wrong. They're fundamentally mystical. So fundamentally, they're on the side of religion, they're not on the side of reason. And the differentiation is not religion versus atheism. The differentiation is faith versus reason. And communism and Nazism are on the side of faith, and therefore on the side of religion. And secondly, not to turn around and then say, more people died in the 30-year war than died in World War II or World War I on a per capita basis, a war of religion, Catholics versus Protestants, different Protestants. More people have died at the hand of the Catholic Church than died at the hand of communists or fascists over the decades, over the centuries, I guess. You've got to be harsh, like you've got to at least say it. You can say it with a smile and you can say, come on, Dennis. I mean, religion's not exactly pacifist, right? It's not exactly, well, it's not exactly peaceful, right? Look at all the bloodshed. You know, and I would start with a quote from the Old Testament, where God tells the Jews to go and slaughter this one peoples, the Amalek, and he says, slaughter every man, woman, child, and beast, so not a seed among them will remain. I mean, the Nazis were humane in comparison. Or where the Jews, you know, where they come back, they didn't kill everybody, and they bring back the children and some of the women, right? And like Joshua says, what the hell? I told you to kill everybody. And he said, well, he says, okay, well, kill all the women. You can enslave the boys and you can have the girls as your sex slaves. I mean, literally, that's in the Old Testament. This is Joshua, who, you know, this is the kind of stuff that religion teaches. We studied as schoolboys and school kids in Israel. So you can't let him get away with it. All right. Let's see. So, you know, again, that's not meant as a full-blown critique of, and I'm not going after Craig because these things are hard to do. They're not easy, but you got to be on your toes. And again, I don't think my discussion with Jordan Peterson was particularly good. I don't remember it that well, but I don't think it was particularly good. It could have been a lot better, and I'd like another shot at it. This is not related to anything. Oh, and but let me just say, I don't think I granted Jordan Peterson anything. I don't think I gave him religion. I don't think I said, oh no, that point of view, we're allies in something. I don't think I did that. Maybe I did, but I don't think I did. So This is not related to anything you're speaking about, but there's something on my mind. If Western cultures support abortion, won't that be detrimental to our existence? No, why would it be? I mean, abortion is a way to make sure that when a child is born, he's wanted. So, and that's what you want. You don't want unwanted kids. So size of population is not the standard for anything. When buying a stock, do you get a certificate with it, a piece of paper with lithograph art on it? You used to. Now you get an electronic thing. Right? There's a electronic certificate somewhere. We used to do that. You don't get it anymore. Actually, I think in private deals you still do, and you put it in the vault. I think you still get something in paper, or at least you did 20 years ago. Last time I did a private deal, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Last time I did a private deal. I think you got a certificate, but have you seen the Netflix docuseries Unnatural Selection about genetic engineering? I have not. I'll look it up and I'll give you my thoughts if I catch it. Has someone formally proposed Harry Binswanger versus Jordan Peterson? Can we expect to see more people from ARI OAC start to do political debates themselves? I don't think a Harry Binswanger Jordan Peterson should be a political debate. I think it should be a debate on epistemology. You know, but has anybody proposed it? I think I don't know. But I don't know that anybody is willing to pay Jordan Peterson the kind of money that Jordan Peterson today would want in order to do a debate like that. So I think his rate is in the six figures, and I don't think we can afford that. The answer to Jordan's chair question would be that a rock is not a chair. Otherwise, Jordan would, it wasn't a rock, it was a tree stump. Otherwise, would have referred to so-called chair as a rock in the first place. He rebuted his own question and formulating his thoughts. The tree stump is not a chair, even though it's being used as a chair. Yes, he was wrong in the way he formulated it. I should have said immediately, no, the tree stump's not a chair. The fact that you use it as a chair doesn't make it a chair. You sit on the floor sometimes. You don't call a floor a chair. You're sitting on the floor. You're sitting on a tree stump. So it's not a chair. That would have been the right answer. And it kind of stumped me, and it shouldn't have. You know, if I was versed in epistemology, if I was versed in those kind of questions, I would have got it immediately. And Harry was like signaling to me from the audience, trying to get me to give the right answer. But anyway, Ayn Rand designated Leonard Peikoff as an intellectual heir on her death in 1982. Now that Dr. Peikoff is retired, is the tradition going to continue? Is there any benefit in having an intellectual heir in the movement? No, the tradition will not continue, and no, there's no benefit in having an intellectual heir in the movement. Leonard Peikoff could be Ayn Rand's intellectual heir because he had studied with her for 30 years. He got it through and through and through, and he was a philosopher, and it was his life project, and he was part of the birth of the objectivist movement, and was immersed in that philosophy and understood it like nobody else on planet Earth. And he was directly connected to Ayn Rand. He was directly her student. First, there's nobody like that has that kind of relationship with Leonard. There's nobody who immersed himself as a student with Leonard to study Ayn Rand with Leonard, who's the only person you could study it like that with. And secondly, there's no whoever that person would be, it's not Ayn Rand. Objectivism has to get over intellectual heirs. And in that sense, it has to accept, not embrace, accept disagreement. It has to accept different interpretations. It's going to have to accept people saying, Ayn Rand was wrong on this point. I think this is the better way to say it. Not being objectivist, but still as part of seeking the truth. That's what I think she would have wanted. That's what I think an intellectual movement does. That's how it grows. The Institute is, because it's Ayn Rand Institute, it's committed to objectivism, is going to commit it to her. But even there, we're interpreting, we're applying, which is not easy or self-evident. So no, there will be no intellectual heir. And there's nobody out there who you would say he's the guy, right? And YM and half, you know, 3/4 of them would say, no, I don't like him. I want this. And why do you need one?
It seems to me that the ARI itself serves that function now.
Well, but even there, I think that's dangerous. But let me make this other point. One of the reasons you need an intellectual era after Ayn Rand died is because a philosophy had not been communicated in a systematic way. Leonard Peikoff achieved that with OPA. Objectivism, qua objectivism, has been communicated. Doesn't mean it, and he's done all the courses, but he's written OPA and done all the courses. Now we need to chew it more. We need to understand it more. We need more, yes. But the work of setting it up as a philosophy that can be understood, studied, examined, that work was done by Leonard, and that, in that sense, that phase is over. Now it has to grow organically as a movement inspired by these ideas, taking these ideas seriously, and see where it goes. And there'll be different directions it takes, and that's fine. As long as people are honest about it. Yeah, Deborah.
The idea of passing it on, it sounds almost like an objectivist papacy. Like, who's going to come next after St. Peter? And it's got to just, like, something about that, it doesn't sit right with me.
I agree with you completely. And I actually, I mean, I don't want to take credit for this in any way, but I did spend significant time arguing for no intellectual heir when maybe Leonard had been tempted, or maybe there was some thought about it. So I thought it would be a huge mistake to name an intellectual heir. Thomas Wright, my girlfriend was outraged to see Peterson on the stage with Objectivists because of his views on women and sexuality, enforced monogamy, women cause chaos, etc. Do you think having him was too much action? Do you think having him was too much action? I'm not sure what that means. I don't regret having him. I mean, yeah, I mean, he's wrong in a lot of things, but he brought an audience. I don't think, looking back on, I'm not sure Ocon was the right place to do it. I think setting it up somewhere else would have been a sanction. Was this too much of a sanction? Maybe it might have been, given that it was Ocon. I think we could have done it better somewhere else. Ridpath, I don't think knew who Peterson was now. It's hurricane season. What are your plans as of now for the worst? Get on a flight out of here, anywhere, pretty much. That's my plan. I'll be gone during hurricane season about 6 weeks. I'll be in California a couple of weeks. I'll be in Israel a couple of weeks. I'm hoping to be in London for a week. That's during hurricane season, and then we'll see after that. But no plans beyond getting out of here if a hurricane hits, and having lots of water. Why don't you get Harry Binswanger on the show? It would be nice to see what his present interests are. I know he was online presence with his discussion group. Yeah, I should have Harry on. I will at some point. I know he has his own show now on ARC UK once a week, something with Harry Binswanger. Just a heads up, when Vosh knows he is outmatched, he bogs down the debate with minutia and debating definitions. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a mess, but and it sounds like he's really bad. I don't know who he is. I just know he's big, and they asked me to debate him, and I said sure. I haven't looked him up yet. I will. All right, thanks everybody. All right, we're done with Super Chat. Thanks, guys. Thank you, my contributors. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the support. Thank you for being here and asking questions. Thank you for all the Super Chatters today. I really appreciate that. And thank you for all the listeners. I'm not sure when next show is. It's going to depend a little bit on our situation in the new condo and what happens with that. But certainly either Monday or Tuesday, I will try to do a show. So I will see you all then. Bye, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Goodbye, Ron.
Thank you.
Bye.